24 years ago, Broken Bow aired for the first time. This was the pilot episode of Enterprise, the Star Trek franchise's follow-up to Voyager. Rather than continue with the 24th century timeline that has been going since the start of Star Trek The Next Generation, this one has the much earlier setting of 2151, 90 years after First Contact and 100 years before Kirk's time. This whole era was uncharted territory, so they were free to tell these new stories without relying too much on established continuity, at least in theory. The rather random episode title comes from the setting of the inciting incident, where a Klingon crashes to Earth pursued by two Suliban. I had forgotten about these aliens. I think they're the main villains for at least the first two seasons, and their chameleonic skin certainly gives them a distinctive look. They are quite creepy when crawling around on ceilings, not so much when sliding under doors. The CGI from those scenes has not aged well. The wounded Klingon is the device that brings the Enterprise crew together. They were already about to take off, but this mission requires Phlox as the only doctor who knows about Klingons, Sato as the only person who can talk to Klingons, and T'Pol as the Vulcan liaison, on top of the existing crew. I would have liked to see the other regulars being recruited as well, but it makes sense that they didn't all come aboard at the last minute. The ship itself is halfway between modern technology and the original Star Trek, with massive warp engines taking up the whole of engineering, chunky buttons and switches instead of touchscreens, and a rather dull-looking bridge in all different shades of grey. Uniforms are similar to modern NASA gear rather than anything too futuristic, so it all still looks quite convincing as a possible near future. The most glaring omission is the lack of AI, but that's really a bonus. Once the ship gets underway, we see that the central characters of the show are going to be Archer, T'Pol and Trip, in an updated version of the classic Kirk, Spock and McCoy trio. Only this time one of them is a woman, so there's a possibility of romance. This was still 2001, so no gay characters were allowed. It is established that Archer and Trip are old friends, while T'Pol seems cold and hostile to start with, but she soon warms up and becomes a trusted part of the crew. Hopefully this isn't the end of all the antagonism, and it can continue for at least a few more episodes. The first big action scene is the Suliban abducting the Klingon, which is quite a creepy sequence, with the pitch black ship lit only by torches, and the aliens fading in and out of view as the crew frantically search for them. Later there is a big phaser battle on the dark and snowy roof of the alien outpost. Again, it's a great set piece and very atmospheric. The pilot had a massive budget for the time, and it still stands up mostly. Even the CGI spaceship scenes still look pretty good by modern standards. There is more sex than any of the 90s Treks, with alien dancers covered in luminous body paint, Archer being kissed by Melinda Clarke from the OC, and the notorious decontamination scene, where Trip and T'Pol rub gel into every inch of each other's bodies. It looks very gratuitous now. I guess you could argue that it was the first indication of the character's romance, but it's obviously just there to titillate the viewers. Finally, the ship ends up in the atmosphere of a gas giant, where the Suliban have their base, and it's made up of dozens of small ships all clumped together, which is another nice visual. Archer ends up confronting the Suliban leader in his weird temporal chamber, and there is an attempt to establish him as Archer's evil nemesis, monologuing at him like a Bond villain. I don't remember the character returning, so it remains to be seen how well that goes. Eventually Archer gets beamed back to the ship, proving that the transporters work just fine, despite everybody regarding them as dangerous experimental technology earlier on. I would have liked to see a few more gory accidents before they started being used routinely. Archer definitely feels like a predecessor to Kirk, leading from the front, getting into fistfights, and kissing alien women. His antagonism to Vulcans is explained with flashbacks to his childhood, as we learn that his father developed the Warp 5 engine, but Vulcans wouldn't allow humanity to use it until after his death. It's a decent enough backstory, but all these father-son scenes are a bit cheesy, and hopefully we won't be subjected to any more of them. Scott Bakula is a charismatic lead actor though, and Archer feels a lot more human than most of the captains did on their first appearances. Jolene Blalock as T'Pol goes from being a cold fish for the first half to gradually warming up by the end. Her demeanour is cool throughout, but she still manages to express her emotions without being too obvious about it, which is a neat balancing act. Connor Trinneer as Trip is likeable enough, clearly based on McCoy, but less abrasive and more down to earth. John Billingsley as Strox is a fun character, always smiling and optimistic, but with a quirky side to him. You can see that he's going to be reliable comic relief. As for the rest of the cast, Reeves is a slightly repressed Englishman, Sato is nervous and inexperienced, and Mayweather is a seasoned space traveller and hotshot pilot. I'm sure they must have all got their own spotlight episodes during the run, but I don't remember any of them developing much more beyond this, but we'll see how it goes. The Blu-ray has 3 minutes of deleted scenes, with 2 more scenes of the alien outpost and one of the crew bonding on the ship. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. There is the first of many text commentaries by Mike and Denise Okuda, which is full of fun facts, but it does contain spoilers for when certain characters die, so I may have to avoid those in future. And there's 2 audio commentaries, one from Rick Berman and Brandon Braga, from when they were making season 4, looking back at how they put the pilot together and which characters and story elements they did or didn't follow upon, so it's a good listen overall. Then there's another commentary from a few years later, after the show had been cancelled. This also has Brandon Braga telling some of the same stories as before, but we also have the director talking about filming some of the scenes, and there's Conor Turner and Dominic Keating adding some funny quips, so it's quite entertaining. Overall, it's a strong first episode. The cast are decent, and the setting has lots of potential, more for the tension between humans and Vulcans than the rather vague temporal Cold War, which I'm pretty sure is never actually resolved. But it's easy to see why viewers at the time would have been optimistic. It's a fine start to the series, and I suspect the subsequent episodes may struggle to match it for some time. I won't be making video reviews for every single episode. The plan is to review episodes weekly on my Patreon, but this one was long enough I thought it was worth turning into a video. And maybe I'll do it again if I have a lot to say about particular episodes. But right now the plan is that I'll just come back at the end of each season and give you an update on what I think of the show from that vantage point. Meanwhile, you can join my Patreon if you want to read my reviews of every single episode. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.